Hello and welcome back. Today I thought I'd share with you a little bit of logic that I rolled for our new upcoming mode for Interstellar 1, which is called the 9 Hells Boss Rush mode. This is kind of like a Caravan time attack mode. And one of the things we need to do is we needed to basically have a game over condition that wasn't a normal fail condition, like when you lose all your lives, for instance. So how about I show you what we got going on? Let me see here and go and start the game so you can see it in standalone first. It's always a good idea when you're doing your scripts to also check in your standalone version. So here we go. Started the game. Interstellar Sentinel. We got our difficulty select.
Communication dialogue to start difficulty.
Stick normal. Doesn't matter in this case.
Cookies.
Extra ship! Extra ship!
Extra ship. All right. Yeah, the new mode's coming along nicely. So we've got the new added to level select. And here we go. And after 3 seconds in the intro, we're going to trigger a game over condition. And this is based on a timer, since we have a timer. So if you watch in the bottom right corner, there'll be a timer. And when it hits 0, we will then trigger this, the game over screen. And yeah, unfortunately, because the way we implement it, there's going to be some things if you have some UI bits and text bits that are going to show up here. But for the most part, you can reuse your asset that you're using for game over and what that looks like. And if you press any button, I have a little debug text that says button pressed. And then it goes to the high score screen, as you would expect. Initials if you had a high score. And then you dump back into the title screen. All right, so how did we do this? All right, so here it is in editor. So as I always like to do, which is a nice thing, a little gameplay trigger. Enemy's HP is less than 1 because there's no enemy attached. This is a game over screen. That's just for in case, because I'm going to forget eventually and I come looking around for stuff. You'll want to make sure that you keep your button presses to, I think that they're fine in this case. Oh, yeah. So you just want to make sure that this lodge, oh, shit. And 1 second. And we're back. That oh shit was me thinking about how inputs work in the world and when they can be triggered or not. So we did a little test here just to make sure that this works as the camera is progressing, which I think would be fine if we do something like this. And I'll walk you through this in a second here. Should be good. All right. So after 10 seconds, the game over screen will trigger. And the camera has moved on now in the physical space away from the triggers. Button pressed. Katoonch. All right. Cool. All right. So it is working as expected. So a couple things that you'll want to know. One is, so we rolled basically our timer logic. And the timer logic is basically, we have a countdown timer set to 1 second increments. And then we have essentially a text object. Duration is also set to 1. In our case, we set it to where there's no fade in or fade out times and no duration. So there's no in and out. You can, do it as you see fit. And then after a second, we come down to another countdown timer. And then we update to 14:59. 58, 57. So each one of these stacks, I know. Each one of these stacks is 1 minute. And so there's 15 stacks in this case because we have a 15-minute timer. And what will happen is at the very end of the, at the countdown, we will then trigger the logic to have the game over screen. But I don't want to wait 15 minutes. That's why we're doing it subsequently. But I wanted to make sure you understood this logic here. So, and that's all this does. I have some other stuff here, which I won't go into. It's a different feature. But what we did here is we said, hey, at the conclusion of 14 minutes, 50 seconds, so out 10 seconds after start, we basically have the switch that updates the text. It comes over here to another countdown timer, which we set to 0.1. It's just more of a placeholder. And then this timer is, what will happen is I'll put this particular thing at the very end as a countdown. So once all of the countdown is complete, if the player hasn't completed the game and the timer hits 0, then you get a game over. All right. So now that you know how that gets triggered, we have basically in here, you can ignore this, but basically it's just a same thing, countdown timer. The more important thing here is that you have under the player control, we have it as stay activated, and I checked, I want to hide the player so the player is no longer there. You can do it differently if you see fit. I want to freeze the controls. I want to hold the fire. I want to disable smart bombs, and I want to turn on invincibility at 999 seconds. The reason why we're doing all these things is because I didn't want the player to get confused with shooting their weapon or getting hit or having getting hit sounds or being able to interact in any other way. The only thing they can do at the game over screen is to press a button and then the game over occur. So after we set that, after 0.1 seconds, we come down to another countdown timer. I just like to use timers so I can separate logic as needed, and 0.1 seconds isn't a long time. And then we do a couple things here, which is then we trigger the game over screen, which is a text object. We leave it as stay activated because we don't want it to go away in our particular case. You could do it differently if you want. The on-screen timer is 9,999 seconds. The type is picture, and this is important if you have in your game. If you've done game over yet, or if you want a game over screen, you don't have to. But basically, you have in the HUD section over at end of game, you have the ability for game over to select a picture, and then these pictures are stored in your pictures directory. So this is the same game over screen picture that we use if the player dies normally, which is they don't have any more continues left, and they've lost all their lives. And I think that's all the main stuff there. So I want to make sure you understood where that was at. So you can see here, back to this. So it's not animating, but you could do an animated texture if you want to. And then rendering order is not a big deal because text objects show up at the very top of the screen. Although, yeah, so I have this at the very, very top layer as well. So text objects always sort on top of everything else that's being rendered in the game. There are some exceptions to that, but for by and large, that's the main thing. And then we have a little transition in our particular case where we want to fade in. And the duration is 0.5 seconds. And then we have a fade out. So when, am I doing that? So I don't think the fade out is necessary in this case. Yeah, so we don't even worry. We don't use the fade out, but it's there if you want it. So it's set by default. All right, and then we trigger a sound object. In our particular case, we're using a little music jingle. This is good because if you use a sound effect, it'll play with your existing music. But if you use music here, which is the little dun, 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 that basically will fade out your existing music track. If you have one playing, which you heard earlier, and then we basically we have the conclusion, and then we do another thing here, which is in camera. We basically, in my case, I didn't also, like, you could do it differently, but I thought I'd slow the camera down in a very short period of time and stop it. Just this keeps the player from having anxiety with seeing the camera moving and seeing the world progress. It could be a style thing, like you could let the whole game do its thing still. That might be fun and kind of interesting and dynamic, but this is sort of the process that I was going, easy enough to change. And then after all those things are set, we come down here, we have another timer that they've set. So this particular timer is, let's see here, input delay. So sometimes when you have your properties, you can also just add little notes here. You don't have a lot of room in the name, but like I can come back here when I click on this and see that, hey, this basically means that the game over screen appears and there's 1 second of buffer before the player can just master it. So if you have someone that's tapping very quickly, you don't want the game over to appear and then blink away, right? So this gives us the ability to buffer that. So after a second, then we come down here and we have basically the button functionality. So we have it set to switch mode. We have it set to press. You could set it to hold if you want. It's mileage. It's your design mileage. Personally, I just think a press is fine there. And then we did it for all the main face buttons. So button 1A, 2B, 3X. You could put it every button if you want. In this particular case, each one of these buttons then feed into a trigger. And this trigger is set to switch mode, which means it can get multiple signals from any one of them. And the connected entity state, which is not connected to anything other than these triggers, is set to sum alive. This is important. So this means that any one of these fake enemies, if you will, these button logic modifiers, can send a signal to the input. So you can see this here in a sec. Oh, it's after 10 seconds, but I'll show you in a second. Oh, you can't even see it. Well, anyways, doesn't matter. You can, if I do this, I think that will that work? Whatever, just do this. All right, so, let me delete. So always when you want to show stuff, that's always the thing, right? Here we go, unhook this, and switch this to enemies HP is that. All right, so here we go. So you can see here, I'm pushing any of the buttons, and that's important because if you don't set it up correctly, it'll wait for all of them to be a compound condition, in which you'll have to modify that. So let me just reload that. That's pretty much it. I think it works pretty well, better than I expected it to, which is great. And again, you only need this if you want to rock your own like Caravan mode or something to that effect. You want to make sure that your timer logic is triggered and starts at least in the world. So because if you don't have any countdown timers that have been in the camera effective range or the camera look ahead range, you won't be able to rely on those triggers. I got hiccups apparently. All right. Okay, cool. Was there anything else? Oh, and yeah, so the last thing is that we just put in this, this is a little button press text. I highly recommend when you're trying to debug logic, add a little text statement. This is like printf debugging for poor man's version. That way you can understand that the logic block is progressing as expected. So we don't need that anymore. And then at the very end of all this logic, we basically, we show the end level message. We don't show scores in our case. We check it as the last level because we want to end the game. And yeah, so any one of these inputs after that 1 second has progressed will then trigger the end game logic, right? So, and then I'll just real quick. So here you go. This will give you a sense for everything we're doing. That way you can always just pretty easily follow along without me going crazy, trying to jump around and show all these concepts. And that's it. So happy caravanning, happy time attack moding. There is a way to get to that. And I think it's nice to have a little bit of a like a core game loop. And sort of, we have to circumvent a little bit of the way the core menus work, but because of input, which came out in the last main update of Shmup Creator and a couple other things with the updates to the handling the player controller, we now have the ability almost to roll essentially game over screens. So this will work in this case. We'll be able to do some other things in the future. I can't wait to share that. And I'll talk to you all soon. Thanks, everybody.